find it fascinating whenever I'm talking to many of you folks, how exciting your life has been, or how interesting the adventures you've had. And it gives me great delight to be able to share John Horrigan with you this morning. He really is a fascinating fellow. Well, I'm not sure if he's fascinating, but his life has sure been fascinating, right? So ladies and gentlemen, welcome John.
Hi everybody.
John, we spent some time together the other day, and
Hour and a half.
well, and it could have been a lot longer too. It was very, very interesting. We moved from one thing to another, and of course in our about 20-minute time frame, we're very limited with the amount of information we could cover. I want to begin with just a brief overview of where you started.
So I was born in New York City, and we moved to Connecticut when I was about 8 years old. So I grew up in Westport, Connecticut. It's a commuter community from New York. My dad worked in life insurance in New York City. Went to high school there, and then after that went to college for a couple of years, and then I joined the Army.
This is where I find it so fascinating. I had family who was in the military during the Second World War. I lost an uncle. It's very interesting, the different aspects and different connections. And I found it so exciting, John. You entered the Army, and tell us where you went and with what division.
Yeah.
And I would like you to just move through some of your slides and share those interesting episodes that you shared with me.
So I joined the Army in 1973, and it's kind of funny, when I was getting out of high school, I was really interested in learning about electronics. I didn't really know much about it. I had a stereo and things like that. But my parents convinced me to go and study liberal arts. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I saw an ad in the summer of '73 that said, join the Army and get a bonus of $1,000. Well, that seemed like a lot of money in those days. And but they wanted you to join the infantry. So I said, no, that's not for me. So I went and said, do you have anything in electronics? And he said, oh yeah, we have this great program. You can go and study electronics. So I did that for about almost 2 years. And then it's very funny. I've met somebody before who was in the Air Force in Thailand, so back in the 70s, early 70s, and so I thought, well, Thailand sounds like an interesting place. I didn't know anything about it, so I wrote down I'd like to go to Thailand when I filled out my dream sheet about where I wanted to go. And of course, they sent me to Berlin, West Berlin, Germany, which ended up being a very, very good place to be, but which I never really knew anything about. So that's how I ended up in Berlin.
And you went to work where?
Well, I studied in electronics I was in the Army Security Agency. It's a branch of then a pretty much unknown organization called the NSA, the National Security Agency. Now everybody knows what that is, but back in the 70s and the 60s, that was kind of the secret organization of the intelligence community. So they had a Navy, an Army, and an Air Force branch, and I was in the Army branch. And I'll tell you a funny story about school. I went to school in Massachusetts, but then also at the NSA headquarters near Washington, in Maryland. And there was a fellow in my class, and he was in the Navy Security Agency, and so he told everybody in class a story about what had happened to him. And here's what happened to him. If in the Navy or the military, if you have the same rank and same qualifications as somebody, and you can find somebody to change a deployment with you, if you want to go someplace or you don't want to go someplace, and you can find somebody to switch with you, you can do that. So this guy got stationed on a boat in the Pacific Ocean, but he didn't want to go, so he found somebody else to go in his place. And the name of that boat was the Pueblo. If you've ever heard of the Pueblo, that was the spy ship that was captured by the North Koreans. It was a big incident back in the early 70s. And I remember there was a picture of all the guys, and some of them were giving the finger in the picture, which the North Koreans didn't know what it was, but they were saying they had propaganda that they were being treated so well, and not exactly the case. So anyway, he traded jobs, and one guy ended up a prisoner of North Korea, and then he was he was with me in Maryland.
Let's get back to Berlin then. You shared a number of very interesting stories. Do you want to walk us through a couple of these slides?
So this is the base that I was in called Teufelsberg. If you know German at all, Teufelsberg means Devil's Mountain. It wasn't called Devil's Mountain because there was an NSA listening base on the top of it. It was called that because it was built next to a little lake that was called the Devil's Sea. And it was in the forest of Berlin up near the Olympic Stadium where Jesse Owens was from the 1936 Olympics. And anyway, after World War II, what happened is that most of Berlin was just completely destroyed. And there weren't any men left. They'd all, gone off to war, many of them had been killed. So they enlisted the aid of women. They called them Trümmelfrauen. That meant that they were rubble women, and what their job was to clean up all the rubble that was left over. When the Soviets came in to Berlin, they were pretty angry about Stalingrad and all the other things that had happened, and they just shelled the buildings and destroyed everything. And of course, it was also destroyed by Allied bombing attacks. And so they cleaned up all the bricks, and all the rubble that couldn't be cleaned was piled up in 2 or 3 places around Berlin, and they made these rubble mountains. And somebody got the idea that, the American Army, we were in charge of the Brits, the French, and the Americans were in charge of West Berlin, Soviets were in charge of East Berlin. And so they built this base on top of one of the rubble mountains. And as you can see, the main building is a little bit suggestive of something else. So, the irony never dies. And I work both in the central building and the little building to the side. But I don't have any actual pictures because I wasn't allowed to make any pictures. It was a secret base. I mean, people could see it. You can still see it. And I went back to Berlin a couple of years ago, and the interesting thing, let's see, no, it's not switching. Okay, so the interesting thing is that it was decommissioned. The wall fell in 1989. It was just decommissioned as an American base, and they tried to turn it into a hotel because it's up on this big hill, and it's got a great view of the north of Berlin, of the radio tower and the Olympic Stadium and the city. And now it's an urban art installation. So I don't know if the people that are working there know that it used to be an NSA base, but it's got a lot of political art and everything. Could you just switch to the next slide? Oh, there we go. So it's a lot of political art and pretty interesting. But this is a base that was top secret, so no Germans or anybody else could walk around inside of it. But now, and I couldn't take any pictures during the time I was there for a couple of years. But now it's a big urban art installation.
Are you able to talk about the work that you did there?
I worked in electronics. We did surveillance. Berlin, right in the middle of East Germany filled with Soviet army, and so we used to just listen to everything. And I worked in electronics repair.
So you didn't actually do the listening?
No, I didn't do the listening.
Your next slide shows.
So there's another interesting story. Let me see if I can get to it. Okay, so another interesting story. After I left the Army in 1977, I went to German University for a couple of years. And during that time, I befriended an American who was named Ronnie. And Ronnie was from San Francisco. He was a very flamboyant looking guy. He was an opera singer, and Ronnie actually was one of the headliners in the comic opera in East Berlin, which is one of the big musical companies there, classical music. So Ronnie used to be one of their headliners, singing roles. And Ronnie had a friend named Karl Heinz who was a ballet dancer. And Karl Heinz found this old BMW Cabriolet, and he fixed up this cabriolet for Ronnie, and Ronnie, paid for him to fix it up. Of course, Karl Heinz was in East German, so he couldn't bring it over to West Germany. So Ronnie and I went to pick up the car, and we got the car at the border of Checkpoint Charlie, and the plan was drive it across. And in those days, next slide. Oh yeah, so the Checkpoint Charlie wasn't just a little crossing where you stepped across. It was a great big wide area. So we're looking at it from East Berlin. You'd go through that gate, and then you'd go around those barriers. You'd have to stop and get out. They'd check your car, and then eventually West Berlin was those buildings that are over in the background. And so anyway, we picked up the car, and Ronnie was an opera singer. He was also kind of a he couldn't do physical things that much. And so anyway, we got halfway there. We turned off the car. We went into the building, showed our passports, and then we went out. And the guards checked the car. They want to check and see if anything's in there. They checked the car. They couldn't find anything. So we go to start. The car wouldn't start. And so I was trying to get Ronnie to pop the clutch and pushing the car. And of course, the Germans with their machine guns are laughing hysterically. They thought that was so funny. I said, can we push the car into West Berlin? They said, no, it has to drive it into East Berlin. So eventually we did get it started, and putt, went into West Berlin. And I think then he had somebody come and pick it up. So just a kind of interesting story. Now if you go to Checkpoint Charlie, I was there a couple of years ago. It's just a line in the pavement, and it's a Instagrammable photo opportunity. And all that area that was the wall is now full of buildings that have been built. But the East Germans, as the wall progressed, they tore everything down.
You have another story about Ronnie. Is it Ronnie and the...
Well, there's another story about Ronnie and Karl Heinz. And Ronnie, as I said, was a flamboyant character. He liked fancy cars. So Ronnie had somehow bought the Mercedes-Benz from Prince Rainier of Monaco. And this was a great big long stretch Mercedes. It was dark blue, had curtains in the back, and big gold, symbols on the side. We used to sometimes, he'd drive. He was an interesting looking character. He dyed his hair jet black, and he had a kind of Diablo beard look. And so he would be driving us, and we'd sit in the back, and people would be trying to look in the window and figure out what important person was in there. But it was just maybe me and another friend. Well, anyway, Ronnie used to drive back and forth across Checkpoint Charlie. He lived very close to there, in the comic opera not far also. And so he would drive back and forth every day. One time he took this giant Mercedes. This is back in the 70s, so it was at a time when the remote trunk lock was very rare, where you could open the car from the inside, the trunk from the inside. And now all the cars have that, of course. And so anyway, he got into the border and went and checked with his papers. And now this was a huge car, so you could have fit a whole family in the trunk. So anyway, Ronnie came back out, and to let them inspect the car. They couldn't get the trunk open. So he, whatever he did, he couldn't get it open. So they finally allowed him to call Karl Heinz, and then he was able to back the Mercedes so that just the tail end of it went into East Berlin, and then Karl Heinz was able to get it open. But they wouldn't let him proceed, and they wouldn't let him go back. He had to stay in Checkpoint Charlie. So there's probably thousands of stories like that of things that happened.
So interesting.
Just a couple.
Just one or two, right. You spent a total of how many years in Germany?
I was in Berlin for almost 5 years, yeah.
And you finished with the military and studied?
In 77, and then I went to German university for a couple of years.
And you were pursuing what education?
When I was in Germany, I was studying German, because you have to have a certain level of fluency to be able to matriculate into a German university, and then I was studying German area studies, Germanistik.
And you went from there back to the United States to study?
And then in 1980, I decided to go back and study library science. So I did that for a couple of years, kind of a semester at a time, then take a semester off, and then go back. And I was always interested in traveling, so I was always looking for traveling opportunities.
I found that fascinating that you would spend as much time as you did studying and traveling. And somewhere in your travels, you met someone.
Well, as I said, I studied to be a librarian, so I ended up working as a librarian for a few years. I got a job as a law librarian, which was kind of funny because I'd taken a legal bibliography class at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, and but I didn't certainly know a lot about the law, just about doing research. And I got this job in the law library for the Connecticut State Library, and all of a sudden judges and lawyers were asking me, you know, for help with research. And I'm kind of thinking, well, shouldn't you be telling me? But anyway, I did that job for a while, and then but I didn't see a big future in that job for me. So I saw an ad looking for a librarian who wanted to get a master's in Asian studies. So I applied to that program. Maybe I was the only one. I went to Cornell University in upstate New York. It's one of about 6 or 7 libraries that universities that specializes in Southeast Asian studies. So they had a Southeast Asian collection there, and then during that time I had to pick a Southeast Asian language. And I had some friends and visited friends in Indonesia before, so I picked Indonesian language. I could have picked Thai too, but I picked Indonesian and ended up studying Indonesian. And one time I remember my teacher, who was from Bali, I remember him, we used to eat lunch sometime, I remember him telling me, my family's coming to visit. He was supposed to be studying English there, but he wasn't a very dedicated student of English. And so he said, my family's coming. I said, what, your whole family? He said, no, my family, a relative. And so this young lady showed up there, and it turns out that his family, she was from Bali, his family was trying to get them together. And you know, she wasn't interested, and he wasn't really interested either. So I ended up, when I went to go and study in Java, to study Indonesian at a teacher training institute, I also visited this young lady in Bali, and you know, I ended up spending a lot of time there over the next 8 months, and before you knew it, I was getting married. So.
Let's share these pictures, because you married in Bali.
Yeah, we got married in July of 1989. We were married for 32 years. She passed away in 2021. Yeah, this was the marriage, and if you look in my back, there's a traditional knife called a kris that Indonesians like. It's a wavy bladed knife, and my father-in-law was pretty well-to-do, and so he had very elaborate ones. The hilt was made out of gold with all sorts of jewels in it and everything. And I kind of made a little joke. I said, when you get married in Bali, your father-in-law puts the kris in your back, and when you get divorced, he takes the scabbard away and puts it back in.
32 years, produced?
Two children, so let me see if we can find them. So this is part of our wedding ceremony. It took place over 4 days. I think there were 500 people that came, most of whom I didn't know, but in Bali, a lot of people are in clans, so they know a lot of people that are beyond their immediate family. And that's me in 2003. So we used to go to Bali a lot. I had been to Thailand a couple of times over the years, but spent most of my time in Indonesia. And this is my family. So my son Krishna is on the right there, and my daughter Savitri, and that was my wife Raspati and her mom. So Raspati and her mom have both passed on. And I'm going home in a few days because Krishna is expecting a baby with his wife in a few days. So
First grandchild.
First grandchild.
Very good.
Yeah. So.
I wanted to pop back to some of your travels. Have you got pictures of some of your travels?
Well, just this one picture here, I just wanted to show my current wife. I'm married now to a Thai lady, and how I ended up in Thailand is kind of interesting. After my wife, Raspati, passed away in 2021, she got a very serious illness called progressive supranuclear palsy, which not a lot of people really are aware of. It's a kind of I call it an evil cousin of Parkinson's. And within 2 years, she went from being very fit and exercising to being totally handicapped and incapacitated, and then passed away in May 18th, actually, of 2021. And during that time, we had COVID, of course. I was a school teacher. We were kind of locked down, so I was a school librarian. I was doing my job from home. I was also helping to facilitate all of our students had computers that the school issued that they could use for online learning. So I was kind of facilitating that whole process too. And I started teaching English online, and I met this Thai lady through the English online, and after my wife passed away, we were chatting, and she told me about scuba. She was a scuba diver. So I came out here after Thailand opened up again in 2021, and got my open water certification in Phuket. She came out and helped me with that. And so we kind of hit it off, and I decided when I was retiring later that year, I would come and live in Thailand. And now we're married, so it's been 3 years.
Congratulations.
And we both like to travel, so that's good. We spent 3 weeks camping in Iceland. She'd never been camping before, and but did great. And then we spent 3 months camping around national parks in the southwest of the USA last year, and we went around Europe for 9 weeks, and we just got back from a month camping in Australia. So,
Can you share a bit about your bike tour in New Zealand?
well, back in the day, I like to do bike tours. So I think one of my first bike tours was going to France after I left the military in '77. And I took my bike, and I think I took a train out to Chartres and spent a couple of days there, and then I rode through the Loire region, which is famous for all the chateaux. And my goal was to get to a place my father had told me about when he was in Normandy and Germany towards the end of the Second World War, and he'd gone to a place called Mont Saint-Michel, which is a very beautiful monastery, and it's on an island right off the coast of Normandy and Brittany. And at the equinox in September, and then also in the spring, the tide comes in very fast and makes like an island that's basically surrounded by sand filled in with water. So this is a very, very beautiful place. So my goal was to get there by the 25th of September, when the high tide would happen. And so I rode all the way around Brittany and Normandy, and finally ended up there. And then finally back in Paris, where I had no money, and so I had to get some money wired to me by a friend in Germany. I was still living in Germany then. Another bike trip I took was through Scotland for a month, and I got to Edinburgh. I took a train up to Edinburgh, and it was raining. Imagine that, raining in Scotland. So I said, well, I'll just wait till the rain stops. So day 2, it was, guess what, still raining. Day 3, still raining. Day 4, still raining. So day 5, I just took off, and I rode through Scotland. I went up to the Isle of Skye and along Loch Ness, and ended up back in Glasgow. And I think in that 1 month trip, there were like a few days where it didn't rain. It didn't rain all the day, but it was just kind of drizzling or, on and off, So I had a lot of fun. And then another bike trip I took was through, I lived in Australia for a year in the 80s, and I rode around Tasmania for about 11 days. And funny story about that, one of my favorite animals is the echidna, spiny anteater. It kind of looks like a kind of porcupine, but very cute. It's got a long snout, and it and the platypus are the only 2 animals that are egg-laying mammals. And so anyway, the echidna, you see them by the side of the road in Australia sometimes. And I was on my bicycle tour in Tasmania. I got off my bike, I saw an echidna, and I think I watched it for like an hour. And if you don't bother them, they don't bother you. And sometimes they'll like stick their head in the ground if somebody's around, and wait till they go away. And later that night, I was in a pub eating, and some people came up to me and said, "Oh, you're the echidna man. We saw you by the side of the road with the echidnas today." But then we also did a bike trip with a friend of mine from the south of New Zealand all the way up to Auckland. And I'll tell you one thing about New Zealand, there's a lot of hills.
A lot of hills and a lot of twisty, turny roads. Yeah. One final story I would like you to share is your Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai trip.
You mean the dental unit?
No, no, when you were stopped at the border.
When I was stuck at the border.
With the armed guards.
Well, did I tell you about that? Or?
Yes.
No. I don't remember that.
Well,
No.
then talk about the dental care.
Yeah, so my wife, this is my current wife, Nita, she's a dental nurse. She worked 30 years in a government hospital, and also had a dental clinic. And as I said, we like to travel, so we went to Europe last year. And Nita belongs to a dental foundation. I gave a talk about it about a year and a half ago here. It's a dental foundation, dental medical foundation from Bangkok. And what they do is they go around Thailand about 4 or 5 times a year, and they set up a mobile dental clinic. And they have about 50 stations. They're full dental stations. They bring autoclaves with them for sterilizing equipment. They bring everything to do extractions and fillings and cleanings and everything else. And in a day, they might see 500 people, and it's all free. And usually they partner with other organizations like Bangkok Bank or with the Rotary, and then they provide meals, and for everybody that comes, the kids get stuffed animals, and so she goes to that about 4 times a year, and I've started going with her. I've been a few times, and I don't really speak Thai. I don't speak Thai at all, but I found a niche for myself, and that's helping out with organizing the people so they know where to sit when they get triaged. So what happens is you get a ticket, you register, get your blood pressure taken, and then you sit in a line, and there's 2 or 3 dentists that do like a 1-minute examination and decide where you need to go, and then they send you off to get to get a cavity filled, or to get an extraction, or just a cleaning. And so I've been going to that, and that's my job.
Thank you so much, John. It's been a real pleasure spending time and getting to know you. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be doing this on a regular basis. I know every one of you has fascinating and interesting stories from your past. Please get in touch with us if you're willing to be interviewed. John, it's really wonderful to know that you are staying busy, that all your life, all of the things that you've done, your education along with your travels and meeting different people and whatnot, I'm delighted to know that you're still serving people here in Thailand. All the best to you, and we'll hopefully interview you in a couple of years and hear more about some of your travel plans.
Well, and I think looking out at the group here, I think just about everybody has interesting stories.
They all do.
Hopefully you won't need to hunt people down. So I got an email the other day and said, would you be willing to do this? And my first answer was no. And then I said, oh, what the heck, I'll go. But I'm sure that there's lots of interesting stories out there. I know just from people I've spoken to, they have interesting stories. So
absolutely.
This is the person, Dawn and Amy are the people to reach.
Be in touch. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
So, you should applaud more because you could be next otherwise. We're looking around for people who don't applaud to pick on for the next interview. So, thanks for doing that, Dawn. Thanks, John. I had to go out and interview the doctor about things for YouTube, etc. One thing I should have mentioned before, and I keep encouraging people to do this, okay? We are blessed with the increased connectivity now. If you live by yourself, at any age, start a daily check-in group with a couple of other people. You can do it very easily in Messenger, Line, whatever. The life you save could be your own. You're not going to get a note saying, oh, you're going to have a pass out on the floor or slip over in the bath, right? Nobody's going to send you that note. It's just going to happen. And I was part of a check-in group with a couple of other people, one of whom used to be a regular member here. She's gone back to Australia now. She didn't check in one morning because she was part of a check-in group. I phoned up her daughter to say, I contacted her daughter, have you heard from your mother today? No, I haven't. It's an interesting story. And then the daughter phoned the front desk where she lived, and somebody from the front desk went up and had a key to her room and checked on her room and came back and reported, oh, she's asleep in her bedroom. And I thought, what the hell? This time she doesn't fall asleep in her bedroom. So I took my phone, I didn't have a car back then, I took my phone with me, I thought, anyway, Turned out the woman from the front desk had gone in, opened the door, saw the door to the bedroom closed, and just assumed she was asleep in her bedroom. Seriously? Oh my God. She'd slipped over on the floor, not near her phone. She was lying on the floor, unable to get up. She was diabetic. She would have gone into a diabetic coma and starved to death over however many days. But because she was part of a check-in group, she did get to a hospital that day. But from that I learned, I mean, the woman died of embarrassment later, you know, that she just assumed she was asleep. And I learned, you know, if they don't check in, it's like, no, put them on the phone, I have to talk to them. I don't want your report, I want to actually talk to them. So anyways, but be part of a daily check-in group if you live by yourself, okay? Because that's part of the whole emergency procedure. Set yourself up for emergencies. All right, that's enough from me. All right, so we're going to have open forum. And I know that Tall George wants to start off talking about his wonderful experiences in life just recently. Kidding, George. You want to say something? Want to say hello? George?
Be safe. I've got the sign-up sheet for the flu shot here at the Holiday Inn. It's up on the big screen too. If you're interested, 550 baht. I've got the sign-up sheet here. So make sure you do that if you haven't had the flu shot.
Also, you won't be able to just turn up on the day. There has to be 30, you have to be booked in, and there has to be at least 30 people book in for it, or they won't have it. More open forum. The question came up about this gentleman who might have fallen asleep. No, about health insurance.
Yeah.
Recommend. You've got something to share about that too, George.
Yeah, any observations about different plans?
In regard to insurance, I have what's called WR Life, and I have my policy has a high deductible, and it's the lowest value because I want to get my premiums down. But I brought all that information to Bangkok Hospital Pattaya, all the paperwork. So when I was admitted, they did all the paperwork, and then I had, the way it's set up is you don't pay out of your pocket, it comes out of their pocket first. So they paid the maximum they could, and then I was responsible for everything else. When I checked in, I would let people know that when I was in ICU, the specialist came in, and there was a whiteboard on my room, and he came in and he wrote down 4.5 on the whiteboard, and he said that 4.5 is your bill, 4.5 million baht. My bill ended up being 5 million baht, and the insurance paid, the maximum they could pay out was, I think, 300,000. The lady who hit me had no insurance, so I was stuck with about 4.5 million baht. So it's always good to, you know, even if you got minimum insurance, make sure you have all the information at the hospital, because they will get it out of you one way or another.
Also, George, was that on the low side because you'd already claimed for another accident a couple of months previously?
Well, I'd been in 2 months earlier and had maxed out my claim on my arm for the surgery there, so I had to redo it all again. So I just did the max twice on the insurance policy, but I didn't get any problems getting the money.
What was the extent of your
Wait
injury?
a second.
Extent of his injury?
So we have it for the recording.
We don't put open forum.
Oh, we don't? Okay.
What was the extent of your injuries that cost $5 million?
I can tell you the technical arm that's really fucked up. Wait a second, I've got it right here.
Well, first off, I had a concussion. I had a hole in my head. They had to put 2 screws in my head, and then I had